Dr. Bossman Eric Asare, Deputy Chairperson at the Electoral Commission. Isi. Abusia for Amanaboni Echumu HSE Papay are resigning. Yes. Amanabo any Echumu HSE Papay are resigning. Yonko na yentie nia HSE Ebaye, Diana a course ankasa. Dian pa ni siye a nunti ye papa Dr. Bossman Asare, what to me are resigning as a deputy chairperson at the electoral commission. I was for hard as why a baby there, Yanchan on the young court. Na yentie enkoma ekoso emasisi ebeso ase obe subscribe the amebo notification bell no so for more podcast updates aha eda so aye be media gate na be share nso se ha yeni atem ya adwen na eche wona yehu ene ne ayete e social media so yenko na yentie ensem a ekoso electoral commission ene krata atumi akopie mu the presidency emasisi a yeda so
mamfa nkopie mu the Electoral Commission of Ghana ebusanfo omo asoye na Sabri reporter efiri ho a eba no ebusanfo Sabri Dr. Bossman Asare ono oye deputy chairperson Electoral Commission of Ghana ebusanfo Sabri reporter e kan sa se wa resigning just enra na ebetodia say resignation a drop it a council of state yemame Sophia Kufu ebusanfo no resigning and net day ebusanfo another resignation asanso a drop it yebebo de rem na yetimi akojinchiremu as to DSC dia ba de support ama resignation asanso etimi a drop but then before then mamenka yo say ha in SMP TV platform so unsubscribe be say subscribe like or comment no share ama for fronson sa etimi akebi na for fronson sa etimi akebi na chese bibia nso no etimi akosuyi na with respect to Dr. Bossman Asare ebuson for Sabri o kire se o hwe resignation Sabri and as letter or dia ba se Sabri or resign Awonioma bia ebusanfo Sabri wa listed ye gu ha yebebode awram ne akohwe enu nti no ogina so o kire Sabri no ontimi entoa so enye chairperson deputy chairperson emma Electoral Commission of Ghana. Now according to the Minister of State in charge of government communications Felix Kwache Ofosu na ebusanfo Sabri no wetimi submit the resignation letter to the President of the Republic of Ghana, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. Na was cite said them kind was cite reasons in here. For Sabri or church ontimi to aso ni juma enti resignation through Felix Kwache Ofosu honorable and Sabri letter no atimi akodu His Excellency John Dramani Mahama ho or cite and desire to return to academia University of Ghana. Na o share report na indicate said the long-serving electoral official he intends to resume his academic career after years of service at the Electoral Commission effective August 1st, 2026. And in the month of August, Nankasano considering the Electoral Commission of Ghana for so long, or say it is high time so returning back to academia. Now also no or better Jumedia audio. So then I quote in someone as a neoma Dr. Bossman Asare ejina so ama no a resign every easy mamen confirm bi entimi enfama o say regarding Dr. Bossman Asare Felix Kwache Ofosu Nekasa say I can confirm that he has submitted a letter to His Excellency the President indicating that effective 31st July 2026 he will resign his position as Deputy Chairperson of the Electoral Commission. According to Minister No say, the outgoing Deputy Chairperson expressed gratitude to President and the people of Ghana for the opportunity to serve in one of the country's key constitutional bodies. He conveyed his appreciation for the trust placed in him during his tenure as the Electoral Commission of Ghana. And the whole story about Dr. Bossman Asare say he wants to return back to academia no kotwa no Jumedia na odi yes University of Ghana okotwa so because was serving on the Electoral Commission of Ghana was serving for so long, and now ohun say no say bema be bi wa marine and sabre ye bra also otimi a free stage ne so na obi from so ba no so koto ebuson for dwumadia odi ne so nti yes we are in the month of a year June name no ono no or the letter de kind letter no aba His Excellency the President etimi ehun be said be ya through the month of July on the July 31st no sisi de na dwumadie no onto aso eni bi mesi August no or say or return back to the University of Ghana na no so what me akoto adwumadia so for odine so nti letter no and ebusan for Sabre no twa de atoso Sabre o hwe nti no this is the update ebusan for Sabre abeka yensa edi emu nchiremu and so this is the update Sabre atimi ade abetoja talking about the Electoral Commission Deputy Chairperson Dr. Bossman Asare Dr. Bossman Eric Asare ono ehun report abetoja no na Sabre yede emu nchiremu no so atimi de abramintie nko ne nkotie ensemu a Honorable Felix Kwachi official with respect to the resignation from Dr. Bossman Asare. We are that story so nina no ye beje be na etimi di munchire mu nyina no enso etimi de abrem.
And the list has been published, so you are already aware of its content. There were 233 political appointees and then 575 civil and public servants, making a total of 808. Indeed, President Mahama promised to slash down the number of political appointees and people who work at the presidency. The same way he promised to reduce the number of ministers and deputy ministers, and he's done exactly that. Now, if you compare this to the 2024 list, which incidentally President Mahama also submitted last year, even though the list was made up of people who were appointed by President Akufo-Addo, because President Akufo-Addo was not in power as of the deadline that the law gives for the list to be presented. President Mahama submitted it. There were 953 people who worked at the presidency under President Akufo-Addo in 2024, made up of 355 political appointees and 598 civil or public servants. We know that the list of people who work at the presidency had become topical, and combined with the number of ministers that existed under President Akufo-Addo, it raised significant public concern. So President Mahama vowed to reduce the numbers, and he has kept fit. In respect of ministers, currently there are 58 ministers, even though the president promised to work with 60. After the unfortunate loss of two of our colleagues, there has been no replacement. So 58 people are currently working as ministers and deputy ministers. And then currently we have 233 political appointees at the presidency and 575 civil or public servants, making it 808. Now, there have been a number of misleading claims, some in the media and some by political activists predominantly belonging to the New Patriotic Party. This morning there were publications by Manjo Online which sought to create the impression that President Mahama had increased the salaries of political appointees at the presidency, and therefore they said that even though there had been a reduction in the numbers, the salaries had ballooned. We've also heard propagandists of the NPP make the same claim, even though we know that what they are saying is straightforward. They should know, because they were beneficiaries of the arrangement. We all know that when it comes to fixing the emoluments, that is the salaries and working conditions of Article 71 office holders, the law is clear, the constitution is clear, that the president must set up a committee to determine those emoluments. For the avoidance of doubt, President Mahama has not set up a committee to determine the emoluments and working conditions of Article 71 office holders. So the salaries and conditions of Article 71 office holders who are working today under President Mahama were determined by the government that left office on 6th January 2025. This is well known, it is documented. All the NPP activists making those false claims know. Indeed, the law requires that when the committee finishes, the presidency must submit the recommendations made for the presidency to Parliament or the executive to Parliament for approval, and then Parliament will also have the President approve the package for MPs. That was done. So 6th January 2025, President Akufo-Addo submitted the recommendations to Parliament, which was approved. Now, because President Mahama, in compliance with the Constitution, has not set up a committee to determine the conditions of service or the salaries of people working under him, it is what we came to meet that we are taking. It is therefore illogical and blatantly false for anybody, especially members of the opposition, after having determined the conditions of service of Article 71 of the office holders, to turn around and claim that President Mahama has increased the salaries and conditions of Article 71 office holders. Now, when the committee finishes its work, Article 71 office holders are clearly spelled out in the Constitution. So we know the President himself, Vice President, Ministers, Deputy Ministers, MPs, and what have you. The staff who work at the presidency, they are not people who you can classify as Article 71 office holders. However, there's a long established process preceding President Mahama, which makes room for analogous determination. In other words, they are ranked as though they were Article 71 office holders in order to determine their conditions of service. This is what President Akufo-Addo did. This is what President Mills did. President Kufuor, President Rawlings, and President Mahama himself in his previous guise as president between 2013 and 2021. So once that is done, then the salaries are determined. To determine the salaries, there's what we call award points. In other words, a grading that is used. So in 2013, for instance, and I have it here, I can show it to you. In 2013, when President Mahama became president, what had been determined before he left office is clearly stated from the Chief of Staff. The Chief of Staff, for instance, for purposes of determining his conditions of service, is placed below the Speaker of Parliament and above a cabinet minister who is also an MP. That is the ranking. I am a minister of state. I'm also an MP. So I am ranked above somebody who is a minister but not an MP. If the person is a cabinet minister and an MP, he is ranked above somebody who is a cabinet minister and not an MP. So senior presidential advisors are in terms of working conditions, are classified in the same group as cabinet ministers who are MPs. So you find that not all ministers take the same salaries, and this is a practice that has existed since we began operating this constitution. So in 2013, this document shows, for instance, that the Chief of Staff was given award point 75. Then in 2017, or at the tail end of the first term of President Mahama, he set up the Professor Dora Francisca Edubuando Emolument Committee, which determined the conditions of service for Article 71 office holders. That committee said that the Chief of Staff should move from award point 75 to 79. So this is what existed until President Akufo-Addo came to power. So when they came to power, the Chief of Staff was taking this until President Akufo-Addo set up a committee chaired by Professor Ya Ntiamwa Beidu, which determined that for Article 71 office holders, the grade point that will be analogous for determining the Chief of Staff's conditions should move from 79 to 87. This was by the Professor Ya Ntiamwa Beidu Emolument Committee report. So for 2017 to 2021, the grade point was established, based on which the salaries of people who worked at the presidency was determined. The same President Akufo-Addo formed another emoluments committee at the tail end of his administration, chaired by Dr. Mrs. Janet and Pebu Fofie, a prominent lawyer, who also led a committee that determined that, for instance, the Chief of Staff, he should move from 87 as a grade point to 94. So since this government came to power, it is these grade points that have been used. And President Akufo-Addo, President Mahama, has not determined anybody's salary because he does not have the power to do so until a committee does it. The constitution is also clear that nobody's conditions of service can be varied downwards. So President Mahama cannot on his own say that I have reduced the grade points that is used to determine the salary as determined by the constitutionally constituted committee that looked into it. It is when President Mahama sets up a committee to look into the emoluments that the committee may make these recommendations. President Mahama has said that he doesn't believe that he should set up a committee, and that as part of the constitution review process, and indeed over this weekend, Cabinet held an extensive sitting on Friday, Saturday, Sunday to consider the Constitution Review Commission's report. We've not finished. We'll continue by the close of this month, and we will take a position on that. The President has said it publicly, and indeed it is in the committee that looked into the Constitution Amendments report, that an independent emoluments committee should be set up